When I bought my first camera a while back, I was ignorant to sensor size. I was so excited to use my nice professional Micro Four Thirds camera, and then I became addicted to camera reviews on YouTube, and I started to feel that my sensor was less than adequate. I even started to feel like a bit of a loser.
I just checked the Guinness Book of World Records, and unfortunately for us, the Micro Four Thirds sensor placed first in just smallest loser.
Picture it. I was walking around with my Lumix G95 in blissful ignorance. I was lighthearted and carefree, and my life was full of stability. And then I watched a video by Tony Northrup who let me know I had invested in a dying system.
Don't shoot the messenger. It's not what I want, but what I think is going to happen is Micro Four Thirds is going to die. Not suddenly, but slowly over the course of the next couple of years.
I wasn't sure if this could possibly be true, so I decided to do some more scientific research by watching more YouTube videos. And then to my shock, I found out that young people just aren't buying Micro Four Thirds.
Other thing that I've noticed, and I've talked to people that work in camera stores, and what they've noticed is the Micro Four Thirds customer base, the people using Micro Four Thirds cameras, in general, are very old. And anytime I've walked into a camera shop, in fact, this just happened recently, and I saw somebody at the counter talking to somebody, and he had a Micro Four Thirds camera in his hand. He was probably mid-60s, maybe early 70s, and this is pretty typical. It is a much older market. And when I asked the sales rep, I said, I haven't seen somebody in here looking at Micro Four Thirds cameras in a while. And I said, who buys Micro Four Thirds cameras right now? And he said, old men.
And then I discovered that a lot of my favorite Micro Four Thirds content creators were using full frame, and I really needed to find out why.
That in fact, I have been shooting with the Lumix S9 full frame camera. Yes, you heard that right. I'm shooting with full frame.
One of the first advantages full frame seems to have over Micro Four Thirds is that it's better in low light. That's what I discovered from watching Emily from Micro Four Nerds.
The S5 is incredible for the price. I bought it primarily for my wedding photography and videography business, and I do a lot of corporate work and course creation for other brands as well. You can shoot weddings with Micro Four Thirds. I have done in the past. It's great. There's no issue with it whatsoever. However, there is something to be said for just having a camera that you don't have to think about. What I mean by that is if you are in a trickier environment with Micro Four Thirds, you have to choose your lenses a little bit more carefully. You have to make sure your shutter speed is appropriate and your ISO isn't getting too high. With the S5, I wanted a camera where I could just let the camera choose whatever ISO it wants, and I can get on with the rest of the stuff like composing my images, interacting with the couples, thinking about what I need to capture. It really takes the camera out of the equation.
Another disadvantage besides low light performance seems to be the lack of a shallow depth of field. Listen to Jared Poland from Fronos Photos when he reviews the Olympus EM1X.
Well, we got to get real here and talk about who is this camera for? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't think anybody new in the world is going to be like, that camera blows my socks off and I want a Micro Four Thirds sensor. Yes, I am a hater of Micro Four Thirds sensors because I like shooting at higher ISOs. But even shooting at lower ISOs, the quality isn't as good in this camera as you're gonna get from the other professional cameras on the market. Now, it's less expensive than the D5, than the 1DX Mark II, and the Sony A9. The Sony A9 is only $1,500 more for a full frame camera. Will people that already own Olympus glass think that this is a great upgrade, that they need to purchase this? That's possible, but I really can't see too many professional photographers using this. Now, some of the reasoning that the Olympus pros gave us on this trip for using the Olympus system is that the lenses are lighter and smaller, and they can carry more of them around when they're running down the sidelines or hiking. And I get that. You get something that's lighter and smaller, but this body is much heavier and larger than the other Olympus cameras that are out there. And for me, the trade-off for the crappy depth of field that you get, because you don't get that compression, even though you get more bang for your buck with the lenses, you don't get that depth of field that makes your images just look professional. It's that simple. It just doesn't look professional when the background isn't blown out in most of your images.
One advantage I thought Micro Four Thirds had was a crop factor. I knew that if I had a 400 millimeter lens, I could get 800 millimeters worth of reach. But I found out from Tony Northrup that you have to also apply the crop factor to the aperture.
But the reality of it is, while if you use the same f-stop number and you apply crop factor to the focal length, you will get smaller gear. But if you apply the crop factor to both the focal length and the aperture, things stay about the same. Here's a second example. This is the GH5 with the 12 to 40 f2.8, which, using my math, is equivalent to a 24 to 80 f5.6. And here is an A7 III with a full frame sensor with a 28 to 70 f3.5 to f5.6. So it's actually a little bit of a faster lens, but you can see with equivalent results, the size is the same. They're just about exactly the same, except that this one here has a sensor that's 4 times bigger. It'll produce images with a quarter the noise in low light. In good light, the sensor size mix has a big impact on image quality. Here's another example. The Olympus 300 millimeter f4 lens. They advertise it as being equivalent to a full frame 600 millimeter f4 lens. And that would be amazing. As a wildlife photographer, that would be amazing. That's why I have that, because I wanted to check it out because I was so impressed by the claims. Here is our full frame 600 millimeter f4 lens. Let's see if we can even get this in the frame. And it's massive. It's way longer than my puny little arm. And it's, I think it's like 12 pounds. We own it. Like, because it was that much better that we dropped $13,000 on it. The marketing around applying the crop factor to the focal length, not the aperture, didn't check out. And it shows up in your images. There is no substitute for big glass. There just is not.
So as someone who is easily influenced, I went out and bought my first full-frame camera. I got a used Sony a7 IV and a Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens. After straining my neck, I realized the weight was a major issue. And after being laid up in bed for a week, I did some more research and I realized Micro Four Thirds definitely has its advantages. I found out that one of my favorite channels, Petapixel, regularly films with Micro Four Thirds.
So, it occurs to Jordan and I that we talk a lot about Micro Four Thirds, especially on the podcast. And we talk about how we really like the system, even in an age where a lot of people are skeptical about its validity. And then it also occurs to me that we don't just talk about it, we actually use it professionally. I mean, the majority of our YouTube channel is shot on the Panasonic GH7. And I use the OM System OM1 cameras and lenses for all my fly fishing work, both photo and video, because I think it's ideal for adventure kind of stuff.
And I found out from a reliable source, Camera Conspiracies, that Micro Four Thirds just might be better in low light.
This is what we're going to witness today, just some wildlife footage in comparison with these freaks. Are you believing that? Don't look at me, Sony. Look at the lenses. The difference, man. You have any idea how much heft that one has? We're talking about $6,000 American for the Sony a7S III with that G Master 100 to 400 versus like $2,000 for the Olympus. Are you seeing much of a difference? That's the question, but we'll get to it later. Now, first thing we have to tackle, because I said this lens equivalent to 13.4 Tonys. We had 13 Tonys standing in front of the lens, barely any light got through it. And then the equivalence Nazis came out to defend their shed. And they're like, don't you know that Micro Four Thirds is the same amount of light? So here's the deal. Some people say that the toniature is still doubled in full frame. You let in the same amount of light, but you only collect a quarter of much light, something like that. So I put it to the test, a Bob Ross test, same exact settings on Sony a7S III. I had the 12mm Tony 2 on the Olympus, 25mm Tony 2 on the Batis. I conclude that Micro Four Thirds is slightly brighter with the same settings. Therefore, we conclude Micro Four Thirds superior in low light, collecting more light per square inch than any known system to date.
Another advantage of Micro Four Thirds just might be the deeper depth of field. Listen to what Emily from Micro Four Nerds has to say about the advantages of the deeper depth of field for macro photography.
Also, if you're into macro photography, having a less shallow depth of field is actually a huge benefit, because when we're shooting things very, very tiny, if you're shooting at 2.8, you're letting in a great amount of light, but more of your subject is in focus versus full frame. So macro shooters, wildlife shooters, rejoice. Tiny sensors are your friend.
Brian James at Micro Four Thirds Guy also appreciates a deeper depth of field for landscape photography.
I did say about depth of field, and of course, as you go up towards the full frame, so from Micro Four Thirds up to APS-C and then to full frame, you are going to have that much shallower depth of field at open f-stops. So when you get to the f1.8s, f2s, you're going to have a much shallower depth of field. And for things like portrait photography, where you're really wanting to separate the background from the foreground, that's great. But we always go on about the depth of field differences on smaller sensors like the APS-C and the Micro Four Thirds has been a bad thing. But it's not always that way. If you're shooting landscapes, or if you're shooting something which requires a really wide depth of field, then the Micro Four Thirds and the APS-C have an advantage over the full frame. If you're shooting something which is at f16, if your lens will only go to f16, f16 on an APS-C compared to full frame is going to give you an even better depth of range. Depth of field. So something really close is going to be in focus and out to infinity. On Micro Four Thirds, the theory says that even closer will be in focus out to infinity on f16. So when we look on one thing being an advantage or a disadvantage, for different shooting styles, they can turn, and what was a disadvantage is actually an advantage to you.
I will always appreciate the lighter weight of Micro Four Thirds lenses. I'm finding more and more young people are turning to Micro Four Thirds because of the lighter weight. It's not always practical to carry so much weight around.
But all of my Nikon equipment is gone. All of my full frame equipment is gone. I am fully committed to the Micro Four Thirds, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So I have made the jump. I've completely jumped ship from my full frame setup, and once again, the only Nikon I still have is my Z30, which I film my YouTube videos with. So I was tired of all of the weight from full frame. I really didn't want to carry around all of that stuff.
And I have realized that it is still possible to get some background blur with Micro Four Thirds. Even Tony Northrup had to admit this when he was a guest on Camera Conspiracies.
So when Tony Northrup said Micro Four Thirds is dead, he kind of wasn't. There was a lot more behind that title that he meant to say, I think. There was actually, Casey. Thank you for having me on the show to explain my thoughts further. I just wanted you to know I don't hate Micro Four Thirds. I like the ton. And it's harder to get, but you can still get some. You can get a lot. Just check my Squarespace website. Are there not examples of Micro Four Thirds, Tony?
The most important thing that I've learned from this whole experience is that all camera sensors have advantages and disadvantages, but the most important thing is to get out there and enjoy your photography, enjoy making videos. Don't let anyone make you feel like a loser because of the size of your gear. If you like this video, give it a like. Consider subscribing for more camera-related content from a newbie like me. God bless.